we're sitting here until some people.
Did you hear the?
А, уже есть, походу. Давай сейчас, да, я им напишу и потом тебе отвечу. Угу. Хорошо.
Hello. Yeah, she's just. Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you please also invite my colleague from Ukraine? She didn't receive the invitation. Can I write you her email?
Sure.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Does she want to send it?
Yeah, she sent it via email. We'll be able to add
Okay,
it
great.
in there. Or if you just wants to chat it. In fact, you might want to do that. Actually, open up the chat window.
You know, I haven't done a Google Hangout yet.
And there's also the
So
Q&A.
it's nice to see how it
Is
works.
that a separate window or is that?
Oh, there's it. Yeah, she put it in the.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, there.
Gotcha.
Want to keep an eye on both.
But they'll pop up on the number.
Oh, actually, that's not.
You submitted a question, didn't you? Is that you? Did you submit a question earlier?
No. I will
Oh,
ask
okay.
you right now. Okay.
Okay. So.
Did that, so now I invite these people. To,
Yep.
Great. Okay. Getting the hang of this thing.
Someone's coming to get you.
And so there's two people watching. And crank the light up a little bit more. So you can get, because there'll be beeps and things to let you know that somebody has chatted or asked a
And we
question.
can scroll over this and take a look.
Yeah, exactly. And same with, maybe check the email tab once or twice, because I'm not sure that makes a noise or not. So.
If we go to a different page, they can still see us.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. It's the hangout one that's the, yeah, it's always confusing to me.
You look for the symbol down here.
Oh, you can close that. That's the thing I was trying to. Okay. Good. All right. I don't know if you guys want to start or it's a few minutes after.
Sure.
I'm
Well, thank you for coming.
There we go. We got another person. Okay.
We've got an additional guest. Great.
All right,
Well,
good.
we're happy to be here today, and we just wanted to open up the floor, ask if there are any. We have one question, but we'd like to ask if there are any other questions.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, and yeah, I got ahead of myself. This is.
So I'm Cecily Hilleary, and I write for the English website here, The Voice of America.
And I'm Tom Turco. I'm a writer, editor here on the web desk at Voice of America. And so we wanted to know, we've got one great question, but are there other questions that we can kick this off with before we get going? Thoughts, questions, observations?
Maybe you could introduce yourselves.
Yeah, okay. My name is Hanna Ivanova. I'm working for LGBT. I'm from Ukraine. And I'm working as an editor and as a journalist for a program about Donbass. So we make some footages about people who live in occupied territory, and we try to explain that people, what's going on in real life in Ukraine, what officials are going to do, because they have no output to any channels and media, only Russia. And as you know, Russia like make a propaganda, so they really don't have any information about real life of Ukraine, and they are sure that separatists are good, so we try to explain them another side of the situation. Also, I worked for TV channel 5, if you know, here. So,
Nice to meet you.
Excellent. So nice to meet you.
thank you, Mickey.
And our other guest here?
Yeah.
Undo that so Tamika.
Someone.
Hi, are you there? Sorry, we're having a few technical difficulties here. Okay. Okay, shall we move on? So what would you like to discuss today?
As for me, for example, my first question I want to ask, for example, if we talk about something on some program and we have a guest, and I see that a guest really lies and don't tell the truth, what should I do in this situation? Should I interrupt him or what else?
That's an interesting question. I would say that's a problem that most journalists face in an interview. At some point, you say that it's lies. I'm not sure as a journalist that you are in a position where you should make that judgment. You ask the question again. If they refuse to answer, you find another guest who might be able to give the other perspective. I mean, that's balanced journalism. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that, although I would say, you know, you listen, you let them state their case. You know, there's a saying, give them enough rope. If you're of the belief they're lying and you know the facts are otherwise than what they're stating, let them state whatever it is. And then that doesn't mean you can question them and say, hey, the facts state, you're saying this, but the facts state otherwise. And you can press, and you can do it in a fair and measured way without being
Let them state their case. You know, there's a saying, give them enough rope.
and you can still hold your ground. And let them, if they're going to go on the record stating something that you know is factually incorrect, let them do it. And still hold your ground and ask them questions, and you can present the other side.
And maybe you also can answer if you write something on a website and you have a lot of comments, and sometimes these comments are not good. What do you do in this situation?
Is this a moderated forum you're talking about, or?
Not a moderating forum, but some news forum, maybe.
I'm going to defer to Tom here because this is something he does on our website every day, don't you?
Yes. In a case like that, look, if it's, you know, in this nation we have freedom of speech. So somebody can state their case that I might not agree with, that our newsroom might not agree with, our country might not agree. But if they state their case in a way that's not inflammatory, that's not attacking anybody, not using profanity, we'll let them do it. Other people on that forum are going to call them out, believe me. And so, but if they're trying to state something that you know is patently false, then you might, you know, that's your newspaper or television paper's news site. You don't have to publish it. But in the interest of free speech, let them state their case, as long as they're not doing it in an inflammatory way. We'll use that as a shorthand, and let other people call them on it.
Because in Ukraine, in a situation of war, we have opinions. Some people support Ukraine government, other people support separatists, and there is a real big battle between these sides in some, not only forums, but on sites, news sites, And this is why I asked you about this, what to do, because this bottle is very strong, and sometimes I really see that some people from other side, they write not true things, and I don't want my auditory to trust this, reading these comments.
I think a certain amount of healthy debate, even in wartime, is the sign of a healthy country. It's natural you're going to have people pro and con, one side or the other, engaging in that dialogue, but it's once you stop a certain side from speaking that you are engaging in censorship. As long as they're not abusive, I think we've all seen on forums where people start calling each other names or insulting ethnic groups or insulting religious groups. The whole idea of journalism is to present facts, and facts on all sides of a story, and assume that your readers will make up their minds if they're given the facts of both sides. If you are only giving or allowing facts of one side of an argument to be published out of fear that somehow you're going to sway people, that's not a free press. People are smart enough to figure it out by themselves, and certainly a comment or a lie by somebody with a different political point of view isn't going to change anything. Chances are it's not going to change people's opinions at all.
And you know, I hear what you're saying, and I understand it's a lot different when you're in a nation where you're undergoing, you know, a crisis like this. But to bolster what Cecily's saying, I would contend that it would actually bolster your case to let the other side be heard and then stand your ground. It brings into sharp relief the differences of the two sides.
Well, it enhances their credibility as a news organization. Because if you're going to withhold information on one issue, people will question whether you're withholding it on all issues. I think it's far better to err on the side of balance in your reporting. As long as it's not offensive, or doesn't hurt anybody, or as we've discussed, it doesn't incite more violence.
And one more question. What we should do in the situation that this territory in Ukraine that is occupied and we don't accept that government, should we use their comments in our footages?
In your what? I'm sorry.
Footage?
Oh, in your footage.
Absolutely.
So we, otherwise we should show both points of view, our government, Ukraine's official government, and the point of view of separatists.
That's a fair press.
But sometimes it's really, it looks like a propaganda, open propaganda.
Well,
right. That's right, and you might know that. But let the facts speak for themselves. You can set it up in a way you're presenting the facts, you're presenting the Ukrainian parliament's viewpoint, and then the other side can say what you're not advocating what they're saying. You're not speaking to the validity of their viewpoint. You're presenting it, and I think that just it brings the whole issue into sharp focus, and people can make up their own minds, and they will, and you know that.
I'll give an example. Right now we are engaged in a war on terror in the Middle East, and our enemy is the people that call themselves the Islamic State. We certainly quote the Islamic state leaders. We quote them. We will if they give a video statement, we will paraphrase it, we will include it. That doesn't mean that we agree with them, obviously. But how can the public possibly understand the crisis without understanding what the enemy is saying? It's important.
But should we ask them some questions and should we interview them?
I think that's up to your organization. You certainly, we've made a decision, for example, not to give a large platform to terrorists. But honestly, if I had a chance to ask an Islamic State terrorist a question, I certainly would. Would I give him a 1-hour show of his own? No, because that's an opportunity for him to dominate, if you will, with his viewpoint. But yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
You want to bring that volume up?
Yeah.
Can you hear me right now?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, can you hear me right now? Is it
Yes,
okay?
thank you.
Hello, my name is Maria. I'm from Ukraine too.
Hi, Maria.
Hello, I work for Euronews TV company. It's an international news company, but I'm their correspondent in Kiev. And just to follow up with the previous question, I want to inform you that maybe you know that the Ukrainian parliament adopted a law according to which these Russian-backed fighters are considered to be terrorists. And basically, the Ukrainian authority put a restriction on Ukrainian media in order they cannot interview these Russian-backed separatists. So basically, if Ukrainian TV channel will show a soundbite of Russian fighter, then this channel will be fined. So what do you think? Maybe you condemn this kind of restrictions?
No, I mean, Cecily just touched on it. I wouldn't say we condemn it. You know, look, you always, the truth will out, and you want to present all sides because, you know, as we've said a few times here, that that's going to ultimately bolster your side to get everything out. But I mean, here we have a policy too. We don't want to give a platform to terrorists to spread an inflammatory message that, you know, is directly opposed to our nation, and that's what is the case there. So you know, you've got to play by the rules for the most part, but there might come a time where your news organization, in no way, shape, or form advocating what they're saying, but wants to at least in small part present what they're saying and then frame it in a proper way.
It's a very tough question because here in the United States we're protected by our Constitution. If I write a story, I don't have to fear being fined or going to jail. The only way I get in trouble is by not writing a balanced story. Then I hear about it. It's tough. I also understand the pressure of journalists who are living in a situation where there are such laws. Again, it's a choice that the individual publication or media outlet has to make. I would say it's not a free press.
And I know that our instructor interviewed you before this chat. You had an interview via Skype with our instructor, our teacher. And I know that you mentioned that sometimes you can receive some photos, pictures, or some video of the victims, for example, from Syria, and you don't know to show them or not because you don't want to hurt the relatives of the victim. So basically, right now we have the same situation. We have a lot of video from Donbass, from the eastern part of Ukraine, and actually we don't know what kind of video we can show or we cannot show. Do you have some rules, for example, not to show the face of the victim? So do you have some rules how to show the body?
We had to make that decision when we were covering the violence in Syria, and we were trying in the beginning of the revolution in Syria to show faces of everyone who had been killed. It quickly grew too big for us to do, but some of the only photographs that we had of people were sent by families of those who had died already, and we made a decision not to publish those pictures because they were graphic in many cases, and because we felt that they would be upsetting to their families. So it's a matter of taste, I think. For the most part, it's an individual decision that you have to make, but I think it's based out of respect for the audience. You certainly wouldn't want to use any of these pictures in an attempt to persuade another point of view. You don't want to post a dead body to show how vicious the enemy is. That's just not ethical journalism. I mean, it's an individual decision.
Yeah, I mean, and you might not want to show anything too graphic.
Yeah.
Just for your audience, for the families that are watching, not only the family of those involved, but an audience with children in it and such. But at the same time, I think it's fair game. You do want to show what is going on.
Yeah.
You don't want to pull your punches, so to speak, in that respect. And I think it's fair to show without being overly graphic. You want to think it through and do it in a way that is not, well, overly graphic. I'll use the word again.
Yeah.
But to show, honestly, what is happening there. I think that's fair game.
I think with social media now and Instagram and cell phones, we journalists are receiving images we never thought we would ever see. And so we are having to make some very tough choices now. I certainly never thought I'd see some of the pictures that I've seen, and I've seen it all. But if it upsets me, it would upset the audience. It would upset your readers.
But maybe sometimes it is okay to be upset.
But where do you draw the line? It's an interesting.
Well,
if you receive a photograph
no
of a dead child,
you have to make
for example, you know,
right.
that's a very.
I would draw the line at that,
Yeah.
for instance. But you know, I think it oftentimes it's going to vary case to case, and you have to make some tough decisions. I don't think there's any definitive rule book for that.
Well, that rule is changing because I can
Sure.
remember there was a time where you never showed a photograph of any dead person. That was just considered in bad taste.
Mm-hmm.
That's changed. So how dead? If that sounds terrible to say, but what's okay? We're seeing terrible atrocities these days. We see beheadings in the Middle East. Do we show a photo of someone who's been beheaded? Social media has allowed these things to circulate. Other social media have censored it.
So that's a good example.
It's a very good example.
Probably not. In that case,
Yeah.
for instance, a beheading, we would not show that. But you can show a situation that suggests what's going on, short of actually showing the actual violence, and then the story speaks to it.
Speaks for it. Yeah. Does that help?
I have one question. How to fight with propaganda? Should we use some special instruments? Should we, how to fight with it? I mean, an example, of course, of Ukraine that we have here. Should we film, also make some films opposite to that propaganda, or I don't know, maybe you have some examples?
You know, I don't think any of us here are fans of deliberate propaganda at all. We certainly would not do that in our organization. It would not be allowed. I think, and this seems to be a very strong concern of yours right now, I think the propaganda is not as loud as you think it is.
Yes, why?
What I'm saying is that propaganda is usually pretty obvious, if it is propaganda. Your responsibility as a journalist is to put the facts out there from all sides.
But in Ukraine,
Your only responsibility, your job is not to change public opinion. Your job is only to give the public the tools it needs to make its own judgment. That's it.
Fact checking and truth spotting.
but some people on the east of our country don't have a possibility to see some truth.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. It is your responsibility to fact check and to counter. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. I mean, that's the right thing to do. Fact check and present the facts as they are,
Yeah.
and make your own assertions that you know based on the facts. And if that counters what the other side is saying, that's fair game.
And your audience will see that by itself.
Is it okay, for example, to make some films that show patriotic people in army, in other cities in Ukraine?
In the eastern region,
Yes.
and show some of the unflagged troops that are the pro-Russian separatists that are operating.
Yes, I mean to show them that here in Ukraine live people really open, patriotic, that love their country. And is it okay to show them such kind of film?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, I'll try to tell you once more. Is it okay for journalists make some footages or films about patriotism here in Ukraine for people who live in the East, and to show that we have a good country, that people here are open, that love our country, there is no danger here, and all we want to live in the East.
Tom?
I mean, yeah, sure. I would say yes. Why not? If you have the facts to bolster it and you want to show this and present it there, yes. If your news organization deems that as that's freedom of speech too, to do that. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
May I ask a question? Do you know the Russian channel Russia Today? Propagandistic channel? Do you know it? So in Russia, there is a propagandistic TV channel called Russia Today. And now Ukrainian authority decided to create Ukraine Today. So let's say Ukrainian propagandistic TV channel, in order it can broadcast overseas, in order to promote Ukraine and fight Russian propaganda. Do you think, is it a good idea, or should we just do something else in order to fight Russian propaganda overseas in the other countries? the countries that speak Russian language and Russian TV channels?
I think the best way to fight propaganda, if you feel it's propaganda, is simply by showing the example of free speech, by showing all sides, by providing balanced journalism. That's my personal opinion. And that's a tough call.
That's a tough call.
That's a very tough question.
You know,
because that's your impulse.
But I don't, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as, you know, Ukraine today, and you're presenting your side of things in a fair, honest, truthful way. What's wrong with that? So,
I mean, if you will look at the Voice of America, our own mission, if you study the stories on our website, each story presents different points of view on the same subject. But we also separately will present the opinion and views of our government and officials. But we do not allow those views to enter into the stories we write. In other words, you know, we will tell you what one political party says or the other political party. It's all there. But our government, regardless of what, is not telling us what to write, what stories to write. And each one of our stories, it's absolutely. And if I write a story and I send it to Tom to be edited and he thinks that my story is not balanced, he'll send it back.
But how do you decide what should you write, what topics you will write or show to Americans?
It's a good question, and that's a very complicated question. What are the big stories of the day? What stories does your audience like? Because let's be honest, we're all in the business of staying in business, so we like to give audiences what they want to read about. If we feel a story is not being reported enough, it's a group decision, really. It's a group decision for each one of us to write.
It is, and you know, here at Voice of America, VOA, we have a charter, and we have, you know, we present the facts, but we also present, as Cecily just said, the different constituencies, State Department, White House, Congress, and there's a separation, but we'll present the facts as we know them, but then we'll let you know what the State Department is saying. Perhaps what the White House is saying, what the Pentagon has said about something, what members of Congress are saying. So that's part of our charter. In your news organization, you have a certain mission, and you know that's an editorial board. Those things have to be weighed every day, and we do it several times a day here, where there's a meeting, and what are the stories, what enterprise stories do we have, what are the big stories that are out there across the board, and you have to weigh it. And you know, any news organization, that's always, you know, there's probably going to be a vigorous debate, but you know, sometimes it's very clear cut and other times it's more nuanced, and you have to kick that around and make your points and come up with the decision, what are the prioritized stories of the day. I don't know if that answers your question.
And do you have examples when your officials tell some media what to write, or they try maybe to make some accents on some events that you should to show or tell also to Americans?
Are you asking, I'm not sure because there was a little problem with the sound, are you asking whether the organization suggests stories that we could write about or tells us how we should approach those stories?
I mean, if do you have some examples that officials tell some media that they should show to Americans?
No, I mean, we might have. There could be news conferences, interviews. That's one thing, but and we might say, gosh, we have an exclusive interview with Secretary of State John Kerry. Are we going to want to run that? Yes, we are. But is there anybody telling us what we must do? No.
Never.
Mm-mm.
No.
And we wouldn't have that.
It just wouldn't happen here. It's just.
Somebody might try.
Well, they might try. They won't get very far.
That goes on all the time. Of course, you've got those in power, those in authority. Of course, they're going to try to, advance their thinking or their platform on a certain subject. But there's never a mandate. Nobody here can do that.
We're protected at the Voice of America from that, by law.
All the press is in this country.
I mean, now it may be different. For example, I think that there's probably a case of some newspapers who have very strong advertisers who might come to them and want them to emphasize a story more or not. I would imagine those situations arise, but
I think they arise. But I mean, yeah,
we do it in a responsive way.
They arise. Well, I mean, before I came here to VOA 5 years ago, I was private sector journalism for a long time, and they call that separation of church and state. There's the actual church and state, but in at a big newspaper, there's supposed to be, and there is a firewall between the commercial advertising side of the house and the newsroom. And I would say, I don't think any self-respecting organization in this country would ever accede to the requests of a sponsor or an advertiser to do something. They're going to. It all goes, it goes back to facts, truth, credibility, because credibility. You have nothing more important than the credibility of your news organization, because as soon as you lose that with your public, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. Maybe talk about some of the rare exceptions when a news organization might choose not to.
But there could though be a situation where the government or some entity comes to you and says, look, we've got classified information. People's lives could be at risk if you divulge this. And then the news organization has to take a good hard look. Is that true? If that's true, then you don't want to jeopardize somebody, and you might decide not to run something. Or it might be the other entity could be trying to keep something secret that they don't want out, and you have to make that determination. Hey, we had such a situation in this country with the Daniel Ellsberg and the back in the 70s, Pentagon Papers. And the government asked the Washington Post, please, in the New York Times, please do not run those Pentagon Papers that Ellsberg had gotten a hold of. But those news entities made the decision, no, we're going to run this anyway. And they were backed up by the Supreme Court, no less, which is the highest judicial body in the United States.
We face decisions all the time on what, for example, some years ago during the Iraq War, the scandal about Abu Ghraib prison and the way that, unfortunately, some of the U.S. detainees were treated by prison guards. there's a question. Here is a story that makes the United States look bad. Should we publish it? Should we not? Well, we published the pictures because we felt it was in the public's right to know. If you were only thinking about your image, you know, in a non-free press, you wouldn't. There are constantly the WikiLeaks, the Edward Snowden spy scandal. We are faced with these decisions all the time. We do not release information that would harm national security.
Or that would endanger
Or hurt some, yeah, endanger
people in the
somebody's life.
field. That's, you know, where you have to make the determination. It's not easy. I mean, this stuff never is. It's, you know, when you're talking about ethics, it's always, you have to do a lot of thinking and really examine the situation carefully and closely.
Sorry, what is the special punishment for defamation or speech in the United States? Maybe you can remember some example when journalist was brought to justice for spreading or for publishing slander or hate speech.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, a different animal, and there have been many times where journalists have been jailed. Sometimes unjustly, not necessarily for hate speech, but where they were called out for publishing something and they said, no, I have the right to do this. I know that's a little different than what you're asking, but I'm trying to think of a good example. Can you think of one? I mean, there have been instances of that.
Of people refusing to reveal their sources for something of,
well,
I know there have been examples.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of alluding to, but I think, I believe your question was more if somebody is being libelous or hate speech. Yeah, that's not tolerated. I'm trying to think of a good example.
Judith Miller.
Judith Miller, New York Times journalist, and she was jailed.
To reveal her sources.
She wouldn't reveal her sources.
And what was what are the official? You can reveal your sources or you cannot.
Generally, your sources are protected. Unless I think a crime is committed, I forget the exact rules. I think it's an individual thing, but your sources are protected.
But you know, that brings up a whole nother question, not to digress, but here at VOA we have a two-source rule, and we make sure that any story, so that we know that it's true, we have two sources that confirm something before we'll publish it. Now, other news enterprises will, if they feel it's important enough, you know, look at Watergate and Nixon and the Washington Post. And the Washington Post, they had their sources, the editorial board there, they knew who and what it was, but they would not, they wouldn't reveal, but they did publish it. And then you saw what happened. So that's a bit of a digression. I didn't mean to do that, but it brings up a related topic, somewhat on the point you brought up. Did we answer your question, or do you want to explore it further?
But if you can remember, someone was jailed for hate speech, no?
Hate speech.
She was asking, I had a hard time hearing that. We're having some sound problems.
Who's been maybe jailed for hate speech in this country?
I can't think of anybody who's been jailed for.
Say again.
At least he was fined, for example. Or he was dismissed from.
Well, first of all, I don't know any media outlets that would publish hate speech.
But it's happened. There are absolutely instances. I mean, you know, you've got the tabloids in this country, the National Enquirer, some of these types, you know, that a lot of celebrity news and information.
Yeah.
And they'll, there are instances like that, and I'm sure there are other ones. But yeah, if you commit libel, and it happens,
You'll be sued.
and that'll, yeah, that won't be tolerated. So I can't give you off the top of my head a good example of that, but it happens. I say there's self-enforcement at most reputable news agencies, so it doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened inadvertently, and sure, they're brought to task, and there are fines, heavy fines, and
Yeah, I mean, if a newspaper, I mean, we're not talking mainstream media here, but there are small newspapers that are dedicated to covering celebrity news, and they push, as we say, push the envelope in what they can cover, and they have published information about celebrities who've been angry and gotten lawyers and sued them and taken them to court. But they're not going to go to jail for it. And they're not going to, I don't know of any case where anybody would serve jail time, would they? Maybe the paper would have to pay steep fees.
Thank you.
Now I wish I had a computer in front of me. I'd Google it and find out, but maybe we'll get back to you by email.
what else do we have?
There's some questions.
Oh, we have
Yeah.
some questions via IM. Okay.
Losing my eyes here. So let's take a look at the question. Let's see, what do you think of the,
We can start with this one up here.
let's see.
So Andrew, do you want to read it?
Do you
Yes.
want to read the question?
Yes,
Yeah.
it says, should only codes of ethics limit free speech for journalists, or should we introduce any other limitations?
I mean, I think at least from our viewpoint, it's a code of ethics. We don't want to be in the position of censoring or self-censoring.
Yeah. I mean, is the question, limiting free speech? I would say that you need laws protecting free speech, not limiting it. All right, next question. The attack on the Charlie Hebdo office in Paris, was it an attack on free speech? That is a debate that I think will continue. Yes, it was an attack on free speech. There's no doubt about it. Was that free speech hate speech or not? That's the debate. Personally, we would never have allowed a cartoon like that to be published in our own website or in any publication we might put out, simply because it was hurtful to a specific religious group. We would have found that unethical. Did Charlie Hebdo have the right to publish it? Certainly. But it was also aware of the risk involved. It was an irresponsible decision. I think most people agree that. Is an attack ever justified? No. Never.
The VOA put a box on it and gave people.
That's right. We put a black box with a warning, prominent warning, that there's there's material here that offensive, but if you want to go ahead and look at it, click through. And that's how we handled it. And, and we did get flack for that, for just even treating it that way, but we did that.
And the next question.
Is how can we find the borderline where freedom of speech turns into anarchy?
Well, again, that gets into hate speech and fair speech. And obviously, when you get into these kinds of discussions, it's very nuanced, it's very complicated, there's a lot of gray areas. It's not black and white, far from it. And so, the freedom to speak your mind. Here we were talking about this in the newsroom not long ago, And, for instance, in this country, sometimes you'll have the Ku Klux Klan, for instance, the KKK.
I might want to
scourge.
explain it in case they don't know.
That's what, they're a scourge of this country. But, Klansmen in the Deep South and elsewhere.
Racist organization.
But, the High Court, our Supreme Court has ruled, even though they have the right to, that can be regarded, that is hate speech, but they have the right to state it as long as they do it in a way. They'll petition to get right to have a march, for instance, on Main Street in a public space. Private entities have the right to say, no, you're not going to do that here on our property or within our organization. But they do it, and then because you never want to get in a position where you let people speak and you let everybody else say, hey, this is wrong, this is hateful.
There is one exception, though, universally here by law, and we should bring it up, and that's child pornography. It is against the law to publish it, send it, exploit children in any way. That is the one exception to the rule of free speech here, for obvious reasons.
And that gets to the question, yeah. At that point, that's just pure, you're hurting people, and there's no grounds to do that. You can't. That is not allowable. So obviously there are limits, and there are guidelines, and there is some clear-cut definition of what is acceptable and what is not.
We had another question.
We have another written question. You want to read it to us? I'm too blind to see it.
Yes, if I can find where it went.
Try one of the Chrome, that one.
Bear with us. We are.
Let's see it. Maybe ask Bosley if he could just speak his question. Ask Bosley if he could.
Bosley, could you state your question? There's one in writing, but it would be good if we could hear you ask it.
Okay.
Thank you.
My question is, does the internet nowadays open up the possibilities of totally free speech and freedom of expression? Because the whole world has access to internet, so they can express whatever they want to say. Does this mean that the internet is opening up possibilities? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of this?
It certainly has opened up a virtual free speech with very few exceptions, but there are exceptions. Twitter and Facebook have made decisions to pull messages by certain terrorist groups looking to recruit members. They are not showing particularly graphic content by the Islamic State, beheadings and things like that. But I think countries are going to have to rethink free speech because the internet is available and because people can get their information through these social media outlets. There's kind of no point in restricting information, is there, when you have this? I think it's changing attitudes. It's opening up doors for people.
China.
Like China, yeah.
And look, yeah. They have the Great Wall, and they also have the Great Wall where they are censoring what their people can read and see and hear. And we're starting to see that in Russia. Since we're somewhat on the topic, we're Putin has been, that regime has been doing more of that in that country. Would a follow-up to that, or do we need to dig deeper into that?
What are your thoughts?
My thoughts about this opportunity that the internet is providing is that it has the advantages and disadvantages as well.
No question about it.
Yeah. So if also participants ask me, like, if one of person will write something on the internet that will offend you or will offend the certain communities, how can they sue him? Because the internet offers this wide range of, it's very worldwide.
That's right.
We're all making these discoveries together and having these discussions together. In worst case scenarios, organizations like Twitter and Facebook will pull content. But you're right, you can't, I mean, with the good comes the bad.
It's always a balance, and oftentimes it's hard to find. It's not easy to find ever, but you know, that's what you strive for. Free speech, but balance, fair speech, let the facts speak, maybe let other viewpoints that you do not agree with in any way, shape, or form out there, but you can draw there's a certain point you might draw the line.
Maybe check,
the more questions?
We're looking for more questions that we've got coming in.
Yeah. So are there any other situations you found yourself in that you'd like to ask us about? Or maybe there's some information we could give you?
In fact, can you hear me, Yaroslava? If there are any links to the sources where we can read about what we can and what we cannot express publicly, actually Facebook or some other social media probably have their certain regulations when they say that you subscribe and you agree to our terms and conditions. But maybe there is a general rule, and maybe these rules are also observed in media, in traditional media. So that we can find.
Having a good time.
Maybe we say we'll post something on the Google Plus page.
We'll put something up on the Google Plus page for you that we might think would be helpful later.
Okay. Thank you.
You know, and I don't know if this directly answers we will put something up on the Google Plus page, but getting back to forums, for instance, you know, if we don't agree with somebody, and we covered it earlier, but just to revisit it for a second, we'll put up something. If somebody's not saying something inflammatory, not hate speech, not something we know is patently false, if they're not attacking somebody, if they're not trying to sell something, they're not cursing, but we might not agree with it at all, but we'll put it up nonetheless. But we will draw the line. If somebody's doing any of those things, you know, we don't allow that on our site, and we have the right. You know, we have freedom of speech, but there are limits. As we, you know, child pornography. If somebody's making a personal attack on another group or a person, things of that nature, we don't put that up, nor are we under any obligation to.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So I think we're going to wrap up this session unless there are any thoughts, comments, observations, or additional questions that anybody in the group might have. And we thank you for coming today because it's been very interesting, and we really appreciate you being so engaged and allowing us to come and speak with you today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything before we conclude?
No.
Well, then we say thank you to you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was.
Good luck to you. Keep doing a good job that you're doing.
Thank you.
It's not easy, but it's good work.
Yeah.
It's important, and you know that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Till next
Bye.
time. Bye.
Stop broadcasting.